We are recording.
I always wait for that voice, that she doesn't come anymore, because I've got the old one, right? Alrighty. The July 2024 meeting of the Board of Commissioners for the South Whidbey Parks and Recreation District is called to order at 6:01 p.m. The quorum present. Is there anyone for public comments?
There's not.
All right. And we will move on to the approval of the minutes. Has every commissioner had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
Are there any questions or comments or corrections?
No.
Right, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the June meeting.
I will second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the June 2024 meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Eric, aye.
Krista, I.
Jake, aye.
Aye.
Jennifer, aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes and the minutes are approved. Moving on to the treasurer's report. Matt, are you leading us through that?
I am.
All right, thank you.
And can you see the screen, Matt, or?
I cannot. I can see it over your shoulder in the video, but I can't see it in the meeting environment.
Oh.
But I can talk to it if you can't share it in there.
Yeah, well, let me just give me 10 seconds here to see if I'm just sharing the wrong thing. Because I want other people to be able to see it too.
There you go.
Okay, you're up.
Okay, so you want to go to the individual slides for overall?
Yep.
Okay, so again, for reference, up is favorable in all cases. And so green line is actual, the full year, purplish line is budget. And you can see we're trending favorable to budget. The number you see there is roughly 342,000. But as we noted last month, there's a portion of that that's not real, and it's from a timing standpoint because it represents a delta that came from maintenance not happening or capital expenditures not happening in the month that we had forecast. So they're just delayed. So out of that 342, 285 is due to those deferred items. So net favorability is significantly smaller than that. You'll see that reflected on the expense and the revenue slides, because there's also a timing component of the Aquatic Recreation Center billing and reimbursement. So if you go to the expense, I think is next, or revenue is fine. Either way. Yeah, so this favorability in revenue is due 79K of it's due to the mismatch in timing with the reimbursements and invoicing. So just consider revenue to be on plan for the year to date, which is not bad. And then expenses, you can see showing 257K, but 206 to that. So it nets to about 50K favorable in expenses. But those big bars are from deferred items, and the deferred items are the well pump and the pickleball stuff that we had forecast, but that has not yet come to pass from an expenditure standpoint. You can see the fund balances. There are a couple notes on the fund balances because of some actions that were taken. Carrie made the move to combine two of our funds at the county level. So the county will no longer have these separate, but we'll keep tracking them separately. So you'll see them maintained separate, the capital property fund 1 and 2 there. We'll still track them separately because we want to make sure we have discrete accounting of expenses and income there. But from a county standpoint, those are now combined. At some point in the future, we'll combine them ourselves, but for the moment, we'll continue to track them separately. And then the other thing that was resurrected from the existing account structure on the county side was a construction fund to hold the monies that will move in and out for the ARC. So You'll start to see that reflected here once we have monies moving in and out of there. But otherwise, there won't be any obvious change until some meeting in the future. I'll tell you, we're gonna show those two capital property funds as combined. So net, we're on plan from a fund balance standpoint. But that accounting is happening in the background there. Any questions on the report before we head to the updated voucher list?
It's like there's none. Thanks, Matt.
Okay. So you have a voucher list that's totals 133,841.27, and staff can give updates on the changes.
Very few changes. You scroll down here. First of all, you'll notice when Matt referenced here the vouchers, the first one was the new construction fund that we reopened at the last meeting. We've already paid our first bill out of it. You'll notice that the money we got was a little over 15 million, and that was because they give us money to pay the S&P portion of the work, which was 23,000. So we've already wrote our first check, which is kind of exciting. We'll get to that a little bit more later. In terms of vouchers, the changes from when you received this on Friday are minor. There were several refunds, typical summer camp refunds, just people's plans change.
A lot for swim lessons.
There's often been a lot of shuffle, they grab it all at the beginning
Okay.
because they know that it fills up and then their plans change and, other programs come along. So
Okay.
The other two interesting ones that came since you saw this was, we'll talk about this in a bit. You'll see a page freezer one for a couple thousand. This is our new social media archiving, which we'll talk about. And then we got our first pickleball invoice of significance from RWD for $8,000. So those are just kind of fun updates. But other than that, nothing too exciting in the changes from the vouchers that you received on Friday.
I saw something with the airlines.
Yeah, me too.
Oh,
Who's going swim?
yeah, no, that is the annual NRPA conference.
Cool.
Yeah, I should have caught that one, pointed that out.
Where is that?
That is in Atlanta.
Oh,
So, Atlanta, yeah. It's a smart thing to budget as part of the job with CPRP, which is the certification, to keep. This is where you get your training courses, a good chunk of them. So I'll go through a bunch of classes. They have several aquatic sessions. It looks like they're going to be offering too, which will be interesting. So a few hot days in Atlanta. So yeah, good catch, Kristen.
When did you say this?
October, I think 8th to 10th is the conference. So immediately avoiding board meetings. Just very kind of them. So any questions about the vouchers other than that?
The only one I had highlighted. If there are no further questions, I would entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the voucher list in the amount of $133,841.27.
I'll second that motion.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the voucher list in the amount of $133,841.27. All those in favor say aye.
Eric, aye.
Krista, I.
Jake,
Matt, aye.
For aye, all those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, the motion passes and the voucher list is approved. I can get you guys to sign that. Move on to the staff report, please.
Well, I'm going to start with the triathlon, recreation report. It's this Saturday. You may have heard, I know Matt reached out to Carrie and I about this because they are chip sealing two of the major parts of our course where they were scheduled to chip seal too. I won't get into the communication challenges, but at the end of the day, Friday, we realized that they were chip sealing Brooks Hill and Lone Lake. By Monday morning, they had already done a huge stretch of Brooks Hill, which you'll see here on the map. And by Tuesday morning, they had not done Lone Lake. So messages were left through the course of the week with the director and other people in Public Works. Finally, Sky and I just kind of got in the van and went up to the shop. And literally by about an hour, I think we caught it because we were there at noon. And the first thing guy goes, sorry, we're scheduled to do this after lunch. You're out of luck. And, we used a little bit of honey. We were very nice. We were demanding. I mean, we have no power, so we really can't be too demanding. I did ask, we had a permit for like 2 months. I mean, could we have
Schedule.
been notified? But because we had, the guys were very reasonable once we kind of got the defenses down. We just had a conversation and they realized that they had a project on Monday that was outside of our route. So they were able to flip it. So this little stretch here at Lone Lake is not being impacted, which is great. But the reality is we talked, I asked Sky and Sky talked to all the bike people, the people that do this, and they all agree that even by Saturday with more compacting, it's just not safe. So we have eliminated this portion of the race. So basically, if you follow the arrow, they're going to come around. And now when they go to Langley, they're just going to come straight into the park. So it eliminates about 10 miles of the race, unfortunately. But we're still, if you look at, I went on just to make sure we were still kind of in terms of a triathlon. This is we're not a USA triathlon. It's not what we are, but it's a good kind of standard. So I went on their website to see what a triathlon bike parameter should be. We're going to be about 9, maybe 9.5 miles of biking. So we're kind of between what's called a sprint and a super sprint. So it's not abominable what's happening. It's not what people are used to. Traditionally, we're about 19 miles on the full course. So it's a little bit shorter. What I'm hoping is that the conversation with Island County will, part of their argument in email and face to face was, well, the fair is the following week and we have to make sure the road's ready for the fair because they're putting a lot of car traffic on it. Which I said, but you understand how that doesn't make sense when we have bicyclists being, and he kind of shot back to, no, it's just as dangerous for the cars. And I said, come on. And then he kind of dropped his defense. It's like, okay, I see what you're saying. And I'm hoping going forward. But he also, as we talked, shared some legitimate things. They had one of their pavers break down and they were several weeks without it because we wanted to get this job done early July, late June. Their communication. But they had legitimate reasons for the delay. So at the end, I think we had a nice dialogue. Triathlon is going on. Sky got really no negative feedback from the participants. Matter of fact, what he mostly got was appreciation that he understood the safety issues, not only for the people, but a lot of them have very expensive equipment that they would not be interested in driving or riding on a bike. So it's not ideal, but I think a lot of kudos to Sky, who this week is a scramble week for him anyways, but you magnify it with this, and I think he did a great job, and he's listening now. So I'll give it, at least he says it's. Anyway, so triathlons this week. Back to the staff report. Just a reminder that Friday our staff offices will be closed. We're all out in the field just setting up and getting things ready. Other recreation stuff, camps are going really well. Adult softball, as we know, is underway. And Tuesday, July 30th, concerts in the park start. Very exciting. The schedule's back there. So those in the vouchers as well.
Rossicon's the first one. I think I've heard really good things about them.
Yeah. I told Sky that I asked him how many people show up at these. He goes, 150, maybe 200. I said, in SeaTac, a much bigger population. If we got 30, 40 people for music in the park, we were thrilled. So there's obviously a lot more people doing it down there, but point is, that really says something about the community that they show up at these events. So we also invited, the Aquatics Foundation had inquired about tabling at the triathlon. It was a little late for that and really a lot of chaos there. I said, why don't you come to the concerts in the park and table there where there south would be people there, a lot more of them. And they loved it. So they're going to be tabling at the 3 concert events and good win-win. Facilities, triathlon, you're gonna hear that a lot tonight. Irrigation issues and then just normal summer stuff.
What kind of irrigation issues?
Tom didn't explain because they're just chasing it around. It's this time of year where they're just going around it's when they need it, so they're finding the problems and dealing with them. So nothing egregious, just a lot of maintenance on the irrigation stuff. Well, you'll see with your paper in front of you, the exciting deposit or the exciting account. Matt won't be able to see it. I don't have it on computer, just showing that the $15 million is in the account. A lot of kudos to Carrie. This has been a heck of a 6-month run between the audit and the bond rating and getting us to this stage. But we had about a 10-minute meeting with the attorney on Tuesday where it was quick and simple, and you've got your money, and congratulations, and we'll do this again in January. So, all right. So, but a lot of heavy lifting there. So kudos to Carrie on that one. I mentioned page freezer in the invoices, the vouchers. last couple of years of the social media, we have to have our social media archived for public request. The company we're with just jacked the prices up 2 years in a row significantly. So we started looking around. This is actually a company that I think Doug and Carrie were looking at a couple of years ago. We went back to them, had a meeting, got a quote. It was like 1/3 of the price. Got a good reputation of doing the same stuff. I mean, it's stuff we probably will never need, but we have to have. So, the current contract, it goes through like the 3rd week of August. At that point, we'll switch over. So a nice little, it's gonna save the district about $3,000 a year. I'm not happy with
Thank you.
it. So, you know,
So what happens to the archive that is with page whoever right now?
well, it's with Civic Rec now. And it'll, Page Freezer's the new one, and they'll have full access. So they'll have full access to the old record. So they'll be able to pull up stuff from a year ago, 2 years ago. So they have some kind of transfer over. Yeah. That was one of our questions, because obviously we need access to it. So, the other company did offer me a discount as soon as I left. I said,
Comcast to
I
them.
yeah, I said, I don't think you can get to the number. And I said, I've already signed a contract, so, it's a done deal. Met with Jay Ryan from, is it South Whitby Rotary? Man, I hope I'm saying that right. It's, yeah.
So morning meeting.
They're interested in donating $15,000 for a park enhancement. This is the money I think they had allocated originally for the amphitheater. So we met, we discussed several options. Sky sat in on that meeting. I gave them a list of items. The number one item on their list, and honestly, the number one item on my list, is the condition of our basketball court.
Yeah.
It's really bad right now. We'll talk about that in a second. That's the one they're most interested in, if we can come up with a solution that they can contribute to. They also were interested in the water fountain / water bottle. So that's kind of their contingency. So, I also heard from, Luis Nunez. Nunez, excuse me.
Eunice.
Nunez. Okay, interesting. Oh, I didn't say that you were saying. What is the line? Oh, Jennifer had asked, someone had asked, a constituent had asked Jennifer about putting a water bottle filling station in the park.
Filling station.
Sorry, I said that quickly. And we actually got a quote with it, and 15,000 would more than pay for it. So that is an option if the basketball court isn't. But Lewis had reached out. He's the one that does the 3-on-3 tournament last weekend on the basketball court. But so he was also interested in being part of the solution. So we have a couple parties that we might be able to
And
put
I
together.
believe they were very instrumental in getting the original.
Yes,
Lewis was, yeah,
Lewis
that
was.
was his, so.
he's very passionate
That
about
boarding
it.
club at that time, and that was his project.
Yeah.
He also stated that him and his wife do a lot of fundraising and would be interested in now that we have a nonprofit and Rotary on board, and we might be able to put something together. So I reached out to our pickleball guy and I said, hey, who are some good contractors we can get some just estimates from? I don't need a detailed quote. I just need to figure out what the ballpark range is. What we're really talking about is taking off those nice tiles and just laying a more traditional basketball court, just seeing what that price is. The problem with the tiles, from what I understand from Tom and Sky, is the court is slightly tilted, not much, but enough that when it was first put on, the tiles would slide. That's why they bolted. The court literally has bolts in it that are stick up out of the court. And then when it gets hot, it bubbles. I'll show you. I got several pictures because we went out there the other week. Excuse me if I scroll, but I don't know how well you can see this, but this is in the middle of the court here. You see this big line here, and there were several of them there last week when it was particularly hot. So, I mean, Lewis was thinking about what can I do with this. I mean, basically one of the courts was almost unusable for his tournament. The other half was okay, but what happens when it gets hot? The bolts are there, so it can't slide. So it just kind of bubbles up. It's a beautiful court. I was a little concerned that Rotary might be, because they put a lot of investment into this court, but they didn't hesitate with, it needs to be safe. We want to do what we can do. So I appreciated their attitude and their cooperation. So we're looking at it right now. I got some calls out just to get some quotes, just to see what it would take. We'll see where it comes.
There's enough slope on that. I would assume that they're in favor of not tiling it a second time.
Correct. I'm in favor.
Yeah.
And I think Rotary was, when I said that to Rotary, I said, I think if we just lift the tiles, resurface, paint, make it a beautiful. The thing about it, and I grew up on basketball courts with my daughters. Both my daughters were basketball players. we love going to parks, and there's no parks around here other than that one. That's a really nice full court park. I mean, so it's the court in South Whitney, so it's an important investment. And so I'm excited to have Rotary be interested. I'm excited for Lewis's conversation. We can get a price and maybe try to put something together to make this work, because kids are still playing. I was out there today, it was a little bit cooler, a little bit of overcast. Wasn't as bad, just really the sunshine and the bubbles and the heat all kind of amplify it. So we're just gonna keep an eye. But I mean, last week, if it wasn't for Lewis's tournament, I would have closed that half a court. Just wasn't safe. I mean, kids could just fall right over. It was really extreme. So we're working on it. Hopefully in the next couple meetings, I'll have an update with some plans. And then Claire McDonald, who is a cartographer and also a former summer camp, day camp leader, what I understand. We're meeting with her in August to discuss mapping our trails, especially Max Welton. Matt had pointed out that the Max Welton Trail is not on our site, that isn't any good. So we need to get those updated. Hard to find a cartographer. Thank you. A map maker. Really hard to make a map maker. So I did do an All Trails app, and I've started doing some basic maps, which Tom and the Kubota, we're just gonna zip around. We'll get something online for the basic ones, but having some professional maps done with the Trustland one and Max Welton's. Yeah, it's time, and she seems very interested. Clara's off island, but she's coming for a couple weeks in August. So she's got family here, so it doesn't sound like that would be a thing. Lots of upcoming events, the triathlon, our concerts in the park. And then several time offs coming in summertime. So I just put those there so you guys would know when people would or wouldn't be around potentially. And that does it for the staff report.
Committee and community meeting reports. Do any committees have any reports to make? We have one thing for Clinton Community Council on the 25th. There is a sub-area planning meeting for Clinton, for the whole Clinton Gateway and the comprehensive plan. So. And they had, I guess I can say we, since we're part of them, right? So this past month, there were 2 candidate forums. The first one was the Island County Commissioners. It was packed, full house. It was very good. And then 2 weeks later was the one with the state representatives and senators. Unfortunately, I missed that one. It was not as well attended, but I understand it was fine.
There are at least one more of each of those.
I hope so. Yeah, because
And it has no impact on anything because it's not talked about in the house, but you guys do know that one of the candidates is, their son is our employee. I've looked in your face. I'm realizing you didn't know that. Stephen Meyer's son, Jacob, works for us. So, okay, that doesn't mean anything that not talked about here, but just in case someone mentions it out and about, there's a connection.
Jennifer was there talking about trails and expansion and movement along 525 especially. You can't speak to any of those. Of course.
There has been some discussion of that though in the comprehensive plan update.
and that'll, I'm assuming, be part of that sub-area planning or sub-area meeting next month.
It's just been shelved a lot, and there were a lot of people, myself included, that were advocating for a connected trail system.
So you're talking about the
I'm
south
talking
to
about
north, the whole
north
big.
and south, yeah.
Well, so within the Clinton Community Council, it's been talked about off and on by Commissioner Melvin Bacon when she comes. And that short little section they did in Freeland however many years ago, that was over $1 million. So,
No, I get it.
so it's there.
So it's also used, that short little section, It's just
But
one
it's
of
a
those.
lot of money for what it is.
Correct. Yeah,
So is it still there and talked about? Yep.
you mentioned connectivity, that's why I thought they may have had, revisited the plan and said, hey, this is what we'd like. That's why I was hoping here.
No, so I should give you some better information about what the forums were for. So, there were specific questions for each candidate to answer. So they didn't get that deep in the weeds. This is more, on a higher level. They had like a minute and a half for a statement and send the end. So it was a step, right? Yeah. Any other committee reports?
Yeah, Jennifer, I'll give one, couple different aspects of the aquatic center. In no particular order, Brian had received an inquiry from the project in Port Townsend. I don't know when that was, Brian, 2-3 months ago.
About that.
Yeah, a representative of their equivalent to our Parks and Aquatics Foundation, a woman named Diane McDade, who's one of the project leads, and they asked me to come speak to them and meet with the county commissioner, Commissioner Brotherton, who's one of the 3 county commissioners there. And then they have a task force working on a pool project. So I met with the commissioner, the task force, and the foundation over the course of a day and a half. And just so everybody knows, they've asked for our help. They're struggling to come up with a viable path forward on a project. They have a pool, an old one in Port Townsend. In Port Townsend proper, and they're struggling with figuring out what to do. And anyway, so we gave them some ideas and linked them up with some of our experience, contact information on various people, suppliers, feasibility studies, surveys, things with our contractors and our history with our quoting through, the architects and public process with the vote. They're interested in maybe forming a parks district, or a metropolitan park district. So there was all kinds of machinations there, but they appreciated Brian's support, engagement, and our support. So if you're ever in Port Townsend and you want to check in with them, I'll pass on their contact information, or Brian can. And yeah, they're grateful for us, giving them any kind of support we can. Then we had talked last month, we'd done the authorizing resolution on the RCO grants. Those are, we went through the process, and through the initial, dry run board process, got feedback. We'll be uploading the updated presentations tomorrow. So yeah, the substance has not changed. We're not asking for the same amount of money, just got a lot of feedback on cleaning up slides and that sort of thing. And that's a total of roughly 2.4 million in requests that are going in. Tomorrow, the board activities will happen in August. So that's when the formal reviews will happen, and then the board decisions. And then if we're awarded money, it would be in the fourth quarter sometime, depending on the program.
Anything further?
Nope.
All right. Thank you very much, Matt. All right, we will move on to unfinished business, comprehensive plan programs, please.
Well, I have got good news that just came in this morning. That is, Robert Wingart from the Department of Fish and Wildlife said they've got their HPA permit and we can schedule a date with them to remove the game plank in the concrete. So,
That makes me want to go to the community council meeting on Monday and give them good
there we
news.
go. That's good news. So hopefully I have a date by then too. So I gave him dates that Tom, and he's asking for our help just with bringing like the excavator over and stuff like that. So they're gonna do it, but our guys will assist. So that's great news. Robert from the Department of Fish and Wildlife has been nothing but, his hands have been tied. He's been nothing but helpful. I appreciate everything he's done, but it's been a long 6, 7 months and the weather's getting hot. So,
Which dates did you provide?
basically after this week, after the triathlon's done,
Okay.
Tom said any Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday.
Okay.
So that's when he's fully staffed. So hopefully, so that gives them lots of options for, hopefully that'll happen soon. So I'll keep you guys updated. Aquatic Center, we'll talk about the CD move in the next item. Pickleball courts, actually did receive updated designs. The nice thing about the pickleball courts is that the feedback was crystal clear at the meeting. They want 2 things. They want wide courts and they want a divider between the courts. That's what they want. Everything else was great. Yeah, they kind of want a covering, but they realize that financially it's not realistic now. So I sent it back to him to make a few more tweaks, and then the architect, he's supposed to get me back updated pictures, designs next week. Then we're gonna meet to talk about them. So things are moving there. And then once we have kind of come to terms, I'll loop Barry in at the pickleball group, just kind of let them kind of get their eyes on it one last time. Then we're gonna have something in front of you guys sooner than later. So we did the signal. So
When they say full divider, are they talking like a short fence versus?
basically,
Right.
yeah, that was one of their real big things, is that
Yeah,
they're tired of chasing balls into their opponent's
I
courts.
get, it, yeah.
And-
I came back to you, I know Matt, originally, we talked about multi-purpose court,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So that kind of takes some of that away in terms of if you have those dimensions there.
Tom and I were talking about this morning. Is there a way to remove them? Is there a way that make it so that? the
That-
court
Yeah,
can
not
go
to mention
without-
cleaning, once you have one more fence line there,
Yes, that's
which
actually
collects there.
exactly what Tom said.
Yeah.
So, so that's still, we're gonna see what we can afford to. I mean, the expanded courts cost more. You're taking that more of a blueprint. So we're gonna start this process and.
I played quite a bit on those, with just those short sections,
Mhm.
not all the way through. And it's amazing how many balls that actually collects. The same would be true of pickleball, just like tennis.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I get why they want that, but in practicality, I sometimes question, the bigger picture, but, and it does isolate the courts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there'll be gaps on either side for people to walk around and see.
Yeah.
But we'll see. But those were clearly the 2 biggest things that we heard over and over again. In the written comments and in the, there was a movement. I thought the covering would be a bigger topic, but I think they kind of conceded. The new designs do have accommodations for covering, meaning that the funding was found down the line. So he gave me a subset over here of a picture that had here's where you can put in some bolts, here's where you could. So basically, he's thinking through the covering concept so that if money was found in a few
Yeah.
years, it could be added. So
I'm curious if the designer has previous designs, what's more common in the pickleball world. I mean, that's what I would be doing, is asking those questions.
Yeah.
Like, is this something common or is this something unorthodox? But
he's surprised, and he's done a lot of these kind of courts. He was a little surprised
he was surprised.
that was their number one. So
Yeah.
they're basically 88 court size. I mean,
Yeah.
he's expanding the size of the court, and he goes, but it's their passion. It's their. I don't know if it's just I don't know. But like I said, it couldn't have been any more clear what they wanted. It was not a scattered.
Right.
A few comments here and there, and then make the courts bigger and put a divider down the middle. So we'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can afford, but exciting just to get those moving forward. So looking forward to having something in front of you guys soon. That is it for the comp plan reports.
All right, then we'll move on to the Aquatic Recreation Center discussion.
All right. So we have, we've been talking about the move to the CD for a few months, and a few months ago, you guys approved an extended staying in DD for a while, which made sense. So the JACC could do their further work. Where we're at now, I'm just going to go through it's a very simple slideshow, but I kind of want to show some overview. By the way, everything I'm saying there's not been run through the JACC. This is not a JACC recommendation. This is where I see things now, so I just kind of want to walk, make sure that's kind of clear for me. So let me exit that out. moving into CD, and again, I'm giving you kind of some overview numbers here. When we first got the numbers back from ARCC with a 119-page design thing, their cost estimate, again, these are estimates, these are not, we're not gonna know the real numbers till we open up the bids. But the original cost estimate was a little under $2 million over what we have, so 28.9. The JCC did a lot of work to do VE savings, which are basically cost savings, where they went through and kind of found some ways to chip down. And then another idea that was on the board was the idea of making the fitness room what's called an add-on. In other words, have the bidders bid on the fitness room, but have them put it on the side so that they bid it with a fitness room, without a fitness room. Well, the room isn't just the room. If there's no fitness room, there's also no hall. So that's where there's an extended savings. Everyone wants the fitness room. I'm just simply saying that was another way to kind of get the number down closer to the 27 million that we have to spend. So that's where we were in January, February, right around there, right about the time we went to pause. With the understanding that the JCC was still working through things, and they still had some work to do. So currently, if you take what they consider the cost escalations, which are around $100 and some thousand a month, due to the pause, and the pause was inevitable. We could not pause. We didn't have the money until yesterday. So the pause wasn't a bad thing, but their projections is between 3 to 5% of escalation costs a month that we delay moving forward. And then JCC is working through, and this isn't a final list by any means, they're still working, but they're working through other enhancements to make the project better, which comes with a tagline. And then, as Matt had mentioned, he's working through several grant opportunities. If, Matt had mentioned the $2.4 million of grants. If he gets that, then a lot of what we're talking about tonight is kind of mute, because we'll have a lot more funding to pay for a lot more things. But what we have to decide, what you guys have to decide tonight is, are we ready to go into CD? And if we are, how do we want to do it? So the options could be not going into CD and letting JCC make final recommendations, come back next month and let them make their recommendations on how we should proceed. That's an option. The other option is to go into JCC or go into CD and just allow the work to continue, but that's going to kind of rush JCC, I would imagine, what the work they need to do, because once we're into CD, as Matt's pointed out before, things start to get finalized. So there's a little bit of a time crunch when you're in CD. After talking to Paul Curtis from ARC, he threw out a different alternative, which seemed interesting to me. What's going to be my recommendation. Again, this is my recommendation. This is not JCC's. I'm going to say that we move into CD, but we do so at the design level we were at in February after the VE work was done. And then if there's certain items off the list that the JCC is looking at that we feel are non-negotiable, we have to have them. We can add those to this right now. But that sets ARC free to start working. Now, there's a whole list of items to still be considered. What Paul had pointed out is that there's no reason those couldn't be added after the bids had been opened. We know we have the money. Matter of fact, if we heard early enough that we have the grant, let's say, the 2.4 million, it even could be weaved in during CD if depending how early in CD it happened. So we could still add things potentially during CD, but Paul pointed out you also can add them after the bids open. No contractor is going to say, no, we want to do less work. What you have to do is just negotiate the price, and they're not going to, they want the project. But what we were talking about, and what my concern would be, is cost escalations just in general. We need a bid that we open up next year that is within our budget, whatever our budget is. If we get a couple more $1 million worth of grants, our budget's higher. So keeping the core CD project at a level that's as low as we can keep it, but still allowing JCC to add as much as they want. And they could be talking for months about new ideas. The thing about that committee is that they're always finding new opportunities to make this the best school it can be. So this gives them more time to work, because really the final decision can be made in February or March when we're looking at the bid and realize that we've got an extra $1.5 million and new opportunities to add. So my recommendation is to go into CD at the base level, basically. Understanding that there's an entire list of items the JCC still wants to consider that still can be considered either during the project if we find money, or during CD if we find the money, or at the end. So that's my recommendation, but again, it's not my decision. And so you guys' decision is, do you want to move into CD tonight? And if you do, what are the terms so the ARC kind of knows what they're working on?
In my mind, a lot of these really, we say,
Yeah, thank you.
you know, the word add-on, like this is after the fact, and, you know, you look at this list and I can't tell you, I mean, Matt will talk to it, I'm sure, but, how many discussions we've had about every item on here over and over again. And, you know, I look at these and all these are subject to change, meaning the valuation is pretty high on a lot of them. So for example, we talked about a cold plunge tank. We threw out another option at our last meeting that it was $3,000 for a cold plunge. So that would make it that particular amount. Propane fireplace, which I think was originally, it looks like 30,000. I thought it was 50,000 what they had down.
Yeah.
But once again, hard to believe that that's going to actually be 50,000. And on down the list, as I look at these, you know, they're gonna, instead of having a game lawn that's gonna be part of the patio, they're just putting more concrete in. A lot of these, to me, as we get into it, maybe I'm wrong here, Brian, but I thought we got to a point also where the thought was, and I think Rich spoke to it, that they may not fall under extra expenditures. They may not be actually the costs that you see in front of you. So I don't know, that's just my own thought. And I don't, these aren't luxuries. They're part of the pool. Like, for example, if we were to negate the fitness room, quasi multi-purpose room, you then have what I compare to Skagit Head pool. You walk in, there's a pool. There's no other part to it. And that to me seems a little scary in terms of offering the community something of value. So, anyway.
Yeah, and my commentary on to follow up on Eric, the things that are in that list with what the work that the Jack has been doing is going out to talk to operating pools, Port Angeles, Skagit YMCA, Rainier Beach, East Side, in Tacoma, Sammamish Y, and look at design elements, but with the kind of tilting your head towards us actually living with this thing, because this thing's gonna be around it's gonna outlast all of us. And so how do we sustain it so that it'll still be running in 10 years and 25 years and 50 years? And those are the items that have been really the focus of the work. And, you know, how do we reduce the maintenance costs? How do we reduce the operating costs? How do we reduce labor costs? How do we reduce, or how do we increase cost recovery so that the facility is sustainable? Because the upfront cost is one thing, but if we can't sustain it over time, and the time to make some of those sustainability changes is right now. It's not, to me, it's not later in the process when those changes get more expensive. Let's figure out what we want to do to make sure that the cost recovery and that the maintenance and operations costs are things we can sustain. So for example, one of the biggest changes is City of Snohomish, or not City of Snohomish, Snohomish Pool, which is owned by the school district and operated by staff that is part of the city staff. Their biggest recommendation for us was to increase the width of the decks. We have the decks that are the width required by state law at a minimum. And they said that their cost recovery, biggest single cost recovery impact that they saw in our facility was to make the decks wider by 2 feet. So that's a significant change because it's square footage change, but they're the pool in the region that cost recovers at 97% versus like this typical pool around here, Oak Harbor cost recovers at 55%. Port Angeles, it's like 65%. So the pool that's the gold standard for cost recovery, which is a huge sustainability thing, their recommendation was make your decks 2 feet wider. The sustainability element, or the biggest labor cost element that we have on the list was identified by Port Angeles, who said, you need to change the way you have the seating between the two pools so that a single lifeguard can cover those two pools and not require two lifeguards or potentially three lifeguards. So that's a change, costs, but it's a change that will make our labor costs more manageable for a month, a year, 10 years, and 50 years. There's another element in there that is waste heat recovery system on our wastewater. So we warm up the water when we use it in sinks, gray water, and toilets, showers, and we can add a system for a capital cost, who knows what it is, 20,000, 50,000, that will recover waste heat from that wastewater, and we can reuse it for pool heating and reduce the carbon footprint of the facility, reduce our energy costs. So these are the focus of these changes that we've pushed back at ARC has been primarily around those M&O, preparing ourselves to live with this facility, and be able to sustain it for, again, a year, a decade, 25 years, outliving the bonds. The other elements that are on this list, and Eric talked to a couple of them, are kind of focused on the quality of the user experience. And again, finding lessons learned from other facilities. One of these things is what we learned at Rainier Beach, and Eric can talk to it because he was there much longer than I was. They have a big problem with a facility on hot days. Their HVAC system, which was designed by these guys, ARC, and the same subcontractors, can't handle it in hot days, and they have to curtail operations sometimes. So one of the things on the list that the Jack has come back to them with is a need to have a backup HVAC capability or additional capacity to handle those hot days we're facing south. We are opening up a lot of glass to the south. So we're subject to similar conditions that they have in Rainier Beach. Their facility's bigger than ours, so it's not exactly the same, but it's a lesson learned that we need that additional capacity so that we don't have a bunch of users complaining or we're having to cut off the afternoon at 2 p.m. because it's too hot in the building for anybody, the staff, to even operate. So those kinds of things are associated with the quality of the user experience. And these are, it's going to be everybody, all 17,000 citizens, including us, using it, and trying to get it right so that, the fitness room, for example, so that people feel like they're coming to a facility that they saw in the public conversations leading into the bond, and that delivers on things like sustainability and quality of use that were themes to our public information campaign and the lead into the vote. So again, where we left this when we voted to extend in CD was that, again, my perspective, and I think the perspective of the JCC, has been, we get one chance to get this right, and if we don't do our due diligence in this phase and make sure that those lessons learned are rolled into this design from previous ARC designs that are out there. We walked in them. They were built by these same guys. And if we don't do that, then we're going to carry a heavier burden, and the community is going to carry a heavier burden as we go forward.
That's my comment about additions. The HVAC system. I visited two pools that both had the same issue. And that is, on the hottest days of the year, they can't use the pool. And they can't send lifeguards up to a high altitude at all, where their slides, because it gets too warm. So we've been revisiting that over and over again. And keep in mind that, as Matt said, those same companies were saying, no, you won't have that problem. It's covered. We figured out this HVAC thing and we've got it. It's in the design. You'll be able to use these on hot days. No, they can't. And so we're kind of pushing them on that, I think in a good way. The Skagit pool has giant fans that circulate the air. And I was specifically asking lifeguards and staff members there, why do you turn these on? Do you turn them on all the time? And it turns out there's a really good reason why you have those. It's not in our design. So when we talk about additions, I don't think they're luxuries, but as Matt said, when down the road here, when you have a hot day or you have a user experience that's poor, you're going to pay for it and you're not going to get repeat customers. It's not what we intended to provide the public. So I that's why I have trouble with the word addition. It's like an add-on, like, hey, this is something that wasn't presented originally. Well, it was presented originally. So for what it's worth, a lot of thought was put into this. Stays with the ball.
Yeah, and I just close it by saying, the way ARC presented it to us, this transition from DD to CD, was that when we go into CD, they start doing schematics and specs. So we're talking about actual drawings that are going to go to bid, and to go into that phase with these questions unanswered from them, and they've only just restarted, since we authorized that. To move into CD puts us in a place where getting these things implemented that, like I said, may be key to our sustainability of this facility is going to be harder and more expensive. And I can't say that from direct personal experience, but Rich Bachkalupi on our Jack, who's got that experience running an engineering firm, building large commercial facilities, it's easier to make the changes before the schematics are being drawn out, because that's where there's a lot of design labor in, and we have to recreate that. So anyway, my recommendation, and this is not from the Jack because we didn't have the chance to consider this, staff recommendation is that we maintain the course as we are. We continue in DD until ARC gives us a set of drawings, DD drawings that reflect these usability and M&O cost improvements. And then at that point, we bring back to the board to make the move into CD, and off they go. And our hands are, going to be generally off it at that point, as they drew the schematics to what we agreed, and then go out to bid. So, I'm proposing just continuing the course as it is until we get that, successfully get that set of DD drawings, what they call the 100% DD drawing set from ARC, at which point we come back to the board, request approval of those, recommend approval of those, and then send off ARC on their way.
Hey, Matt, I had a question. Thanks for explaining all this stuff. On Snohomish's #1 recommendation to expand the deck space, I think you mentioned it was the #1 cost recovery. And I was thinking about that, and I don't, how does that work? How does that?
So, yep, no, great question. And sorry, I didn't explain that beyond. So one of the key, we walk through Snohomish's cost recovery, like what are the chunks? They have concession revenue, is one chunk. They have, lessons and private lessons. They have a wave pool in there that they rent, but it hasn't generated as much revenue as they thought, because it's hard to keep it running, and staff to keep it running is expensive, and so other things. Their biggest chunk of revenue is hosting events. They hosted in 2023, they hosted something like, and I'll get the number wrong, but it's close to this, 70, I think it was 73 events in 2023. And those are everything ranging from swim meet, a youth swim meet, a master's swim meet, to a, um, kayak safety training session, to a stand-up paddleboard training session, to a scuba safety session, education, where they're reserving the facility for a weekend day or for two evenings or 2 afternoons or, an entire weekend in the case of like a swim meet like that. And they are getting events from all over the sound. I mean, people who would have a similar commute to get to a facility on Whidbey as they would to get to Snohomish. They're coming from places that are far distant, several hour commutes to host an event there. And she said that their aquatics director said the biggest attraction is having enough space to be able to set things up on the deck and still operate around them. So like the scuba people have tables with all their tanks and other paraphernalia and equipment. The paddle boarders are leaning up the paddle boards or the paddles or the PFDs or whatever it is, on the deck or setting them on the deck. The swim meet folks are lining up at the end of the pool to cheer on the people that are swimming in the event. And there's officials that need to be there, and then people need to be able to pass back and forth, and parents and other people who are interested in the event, and making that an experience that they want to come to and that they want to bring their event back to, because a lot of those events now at Snohomish are on an annual cycle, so it's repeating business. They say, hey, you hosted our event successfully in 2023. We want to reserve that same weekend in 2024 and 2025, and can we do a 5-year contract with you? Can we, that kind of thing. So it's being able to, and we have some features in the facility already that are already in the DD design set that help, like the patio. Patio is a huge thing that we have that will allow an event to expand out beyond that wall on the south side. So on a decent day, it's not going to work in February as easily as it's going to work in July, but focusing events around that could utilize that additional space. So the patio, that whole part of the design is also a big help in this area. They love that idea. And the fact that we had, in one of the public meetings we had at that we hosted in the Parks office, we had a couple of community members come and talk about updates to our design to allow this facility to be rented for the outside portion. So this idea of using it for a concert or for a wedding or for a reception of some sort has led to us putting in the design some structure under the grass out in the grassy area so you can set up tents out there, and wiring the outside of the building for speakers and audio and lights so that an evening event could be lit and sound could be included in the into the event planning. So there's parts that have already been incorporated like that and already reflect that idea of hosting events, but the inside space, the one of the guidelines that was used is we visited Anacortes during the high school district championships, and their deck width is 10 feet. And that we just surveyed coaches and parents. They were down on the deck, officials, and they all considered that to be very acceptable. They had the full district meet set up there. They had photographers. They had coaches, teams, 350 kids, divers. And our decks are 8, and that's where that 2-foot expansion comes from, is getting to that width again to be able to support those events. That's what's driving Snohomish's cost recovery.
Thanks so much, Matt. That actually makes really good sense. And not an aquatics background, so I didn't want to assume anything, but I can definitely see how that could bring some money back into the aquatic center. So
Brian, can I ask you a question? I know you talked with Paul about this, so I mean, the big question for me is, I'm kind of on the fence with this. Can we move into CD without I mean, the way you worded it originally, right, was we could still address some of these that are on here while continuing to move forward and not delaying the game.
Correct.
And you mentioned it somewhat that, okay, so what is that time frame that JAC needs to meet? We need to get critical about what we want from this list and how much that's actually gonna cost, right?
Right.
So time frame in terms of, did Paul say months? You know, if we start rolling in the CD now,
Right.
we can get them to start doing the work,
Right.
but they don't necessarily have to include everything on this list.
Right. Let me throw out that everything you and Matt said, I pretty much agree with. My recommendation, I don't think conflicts with what you guys say.
I'm
My,
not saying it is.
no,
I'm just clarifying.
but I'm throwing out that really what I'm talking about is the money. And is there a possibility that when we open those bids next year, it's gonna be a number that we can't live with? Because that ARC in that same meeting said it's about a 5 to 6 month delay at that point. You're having to decide what you want to redesign, they're having to redesign it, you're going back out to bid. So we have to make sure that we're able to accept the bid that comes in, right? That's the goal here. But the other goal is to get the most beautiful aquatic facility that we can have. To answer your question though, I think that when and let's see how to say this smartly. I don't know the answer if ARC, if we decide to stay in DD, there's a couple things that are gonna happen. One is we're gonna have to pay ARC some more money. The 100,000 we allocated is not gonna be enough to stay in there for a couple more months. Plus we're gonna have escalation costs. I don't know the timeline of CD, they start finalizing things. And that's always been the concern about moving into CD. But what ARC said, what Paul said was, at the end of all this, you open up your bid and you've got a shopping list of items you still want in there. And now you've got money because you realize either we got outside funding or the bids came in lower. And then the board can look at the list and say, these are our priorities. We want the pool deck. That's our number one size and we can find the money, or it's close enough that we feel like we can take it out of M&O, or whatever the answer is for the board size.
Because now they've attached specific dollars to the.
We'll have more time to figure out, yeah, we'll actually be able to get a real quote from the contractor at that point. The contractor will say, hey, we want to add 6 feet of pool deck. How much more will that cost us? The price may be different, but those will also be the real prices that they're gonna bid, because at the same time, they'd be bidding the project, so it's the same. So I agree with Matt and Eric completely. I think these are great recommendations. Eric's spot on. I mean, the work has been intense for a long time by this committee. They know their stuff. They know what would be better in this pool. I 100% support and agree with what they want. I'm just looking at the money, and I want to make sure that we get a bid that we can live with, and that we get everything we can get for every penny we have. So, as Matt mentioned, the sustainability in the long term of this pool is, bright. So, I hope that answered your question, Josh.
It does. I mean, I worry about the cost overruns, and you have more experience with this than I do. It seems like every time I turn around, big projects are never coming in on the amount that was estimated. They're always cost overruns.
Yeah.
And I know Matt's looking into, resources to offset those costs or even meet those costs. But I guess that's my bigger concern along with you, Brian, is as well, that as we delay, we're not only not meeting what the public wants in terms of time frame, but we're also escalating costs, and I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
I don't see these as items in my mind, because I have a big question mark by a majority of them on, their actual amounts that they put down.
Sure.
And I think as we move into CD, granted, costs could go up or down, no one knows, right?
Yeah.
But in my mind, a lot of these are not exactly as expensive as we think they're going to be.
That'd be good. We're hoping.
Hopeful.
Yeah, we're hoping.
Well, I mean, the part that you were talking about, the timeline, Eric, like to me, it's, so for example, the HVAC system update to address the facility being too hot to run it. So it's just, say that takes, 40 hours of design time, or 100 hours, say 100 hours of design time. So it's $15,000 worth of design at their normal design rates. And it takes 100 hours to get through it. So we could do that 100 hours in DD, where we are right now, and have it reflected in the drawings. If we get to that point in CD where we've got a schematic drawn out and some contract GC's got a quote, and we say, okay, here, we need this, we want to do this capacity or additional HVAC system capacity or backup HVAC system. It's not like it's going to be only 60 hours worth of work. It's probably going to be 140 hours work, because now we got a drawing, we got an actual drawing, we got to undo. Well, we it's the same amount of time and maybe more time. This is where does it end up in the project timeline? And like I said, the fear I have is that the the work will get more complicated and more expensive to implement things that are, gonna hurt us when it comes to operating and maintaining and sustaining the facility. So to me, it's much better to get it right and get the drawings, get that when we say we're going into CD. Because then once we're in CD, we can just put the thumb down and, expedite these guys. Like that escalation cost, that 650K is just a swag in the wind, right? It's if we could still finish the project on time, and who knows how much just excess they put in their timeline. We finished the project in August 2026. There is no escalation impact, because that's all per month beyond the 2026 completion date. So, we got 2 years between now and then to squeeze the 4 months pause out of the schedule that we just injected because we're on this bond timeline. So I don't know, I'm confident in 2 years we can squeeze that time back out and we won't take on that 650K, but that's just my perspective. Anyway, like I said, I think going into CD, we are going to regret from a maintenance operations and sustainability standpoint, and it's going to create more work than it saves potentially.
So this is my typical both and mentality. Can we cherry pick one or two items off of these additions,
You can do whatever you want.
have them added at this point,
Absolutely.
and say, once these one or two cherry picked items have been designed,
Mhm.
then we move into C.
Well, if you add things from that list, you can move in the CD tonight, just tell me you want it on the list. I mean,
That's kind of, yeah.
I mean, that's fine, that's certainly one of your options.
Because to what you said, Brian, I think, particularly the two recommendations of adding deck space and your HVAC, consideration, or, as an aquatics person, as somebody who spent a ridiculous amount of time on pool decks, those make, of this list,
Mhm.
those are the two that make the most sense to me. As you're saying, from a maintenance and operations point of view.
Mhm.
I am absolutely agreeing that we want this to be the best facility that we can provide to our community. And my hope is that we can include a bunch of these other items and others that perhaps we haven't even thought of quite yet.
Mhm.
But I also am feeling the pressure, the financial pressure, and also the public pressure. The increase of questions of where's the pool and what's going on is really increasing of late.
Mhm.
And I feel it's important to explain to people that we are moving into next steps, that this progress is progressing. I think it was definitely possible to explain the pause because of the funding. But now that we have the funding,
Mhm.
We need to show some progress.
We need to show, some progress, yes, exactly. So that would be my recommendation. That, again, the extending the building to add deck space and adding HVAC backup. Be added to the design, and then we move into Stevie.
It's interesting you say that because out of that whole list, and I know it was well, that those are the two for me personally, that are the big design issues.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
That need to be
Yeah,
part of the
the other stuff can be implemented fairly easy in design, I believe,
Right.
in layman's.
And I did ask specifically about the big items, the items that would be structural to add design space, if that can be added at the end. And he said yes, I did, because that was questions like, you're making a building bigger, that's a big deal, but that's interesting.
See, that throws me. I don't understand that at all. And maybe that I'm ignorant to it, but you're talking about the building layout, the footprint of the building, everything impacts other things when you make it 2 feet longer or 4 feet longer. So,
It would be free, I mean, there would be a
Yeah.
cost to it.
but I would agree, Krista, in terms of those are the big changes in my mind from this list that, need to be addressed before we move forward. And if that's something they can do, and we haven't had that discussion with Brian about, what or Paul, what that step is.
Yeah.
So Krista, I think that's a very good assessment.
The HVAC was the number one thing that jumped out at me, but then hearing Matt and other people chime in on the footprint expansion, the deck space expansion, that makes perfect sense. Like I can 100% wrap my head around that.
Yeah, and I appreciate I think that's great perspective, Krista and Jake. From a, the big number in here is that deck space change, and I agree 100%, Eric. There's no way, I can't believe our architect would say that to us, that they, just changing that's the building itself, which is, it seems insane that they would say that. Like I said, I didn't hear that from them. So I would love to hear that from them and have them explain it. But the things that move the needle are those couple of things. The cold plunge tank we had talked about, Eric, he mentioned earlier, this is something that my perspective is they just don't want to do. And they're throwing a big number at it. Eric's found a really inexpensive way to do something on the pool deck. So to me, I think that can be one that we just carry in an offline discussion with them, because that thing that Eric's talking about is not any kind of significant change. And then the rest of them don't even add up to it's a fraction of a % of the cost estimate. So, and as Brian said at the beginning, these are just estimates, and a lot of these things, some of their costs on them don't seem real. But so I think if the board is good with the two big drivers there, which is the deck space and the HVAC, I think the rest of them we should leave to the Jack to work with ARC, because like I said, these things are critical too, like the change to the bench to allow us to save a lifeguard. Like we may not even be able to, Christy, this as well as anybody, like keeping lifeguards hired in this building is going to be one of our greatest challenges. So if we need one instead of two, it's going to be not just a labor cost savings, but it's going to be a staff, headache savings in trying to keep, full employment in the building and keep the building open. So like, those things, like to my opinion, we can't let them off the hook on these things. And they're small enough dollar items that if we are willing to say, take these things on the deck space number, which is, something north of 600,000, and the HVAC, which is somewhere between 50 and 100,000, that accepting the rest of those things, getting the rest of those things in ARC's hopper to do, which many of them are tiny and not that significant, we shouldn't leave those off because in the grand scheme of the financial there, it's such a small number for the payback that they have. I think to leave them off, we're gonna pay big time for that.
Then I have a question regarding the grants that you're applying for. The applications that you're making, are there any features that are on this list specifically that if we take it out, you would not get the grant?
Question.
No,
You know what I'm saying?
no, the grant is to offset costs that are currently in the 27 million.
So looking at
Yeah,
the slide, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, just to reduce the 27 million. So, you know, the one grant, the one to LWCF is for the entire second pool. So it's the pool and the mechanicals associated with that second pool, which is, you know, none of these things impact that. And the grant request to WWRP is for the walking trail around the outside of the building and the portion of the parking lot associated with that. ADA trail, which is also part of the 27 million. It's part of the site cost, which the site costs out of the 27 is, I think, 4. So it reduces the 4 million site cost by 409,000 or whatever that we were applying for.
I'm gonna step back a second. I want to clarify that ARC comment I made because both Matt and Krista kind of jumped on that. So I may have misspoke or misstated what was said. I don't want to get ARC in bad light here. What they were saying was that if the board decides to take this list and wait until the bid opening to make a decision as to whether we can afford them, that the big items could still be dealt with at that point. They don't have, the question I asked ARC was, do we have to deal with the structural pieces that impact the footprint now? And he said no. So they weren't making any other comment beyond just that it is possible to deal with this on either side.
But the conversation I'm hearing tonight is that we are feeling confident that these two items, increasing the footprint, the additional pool deck space, as well as the HVAC backup, are things that we feel strongly enough about at this point that they should be on the list. The rest, I think, in just looking through them, those can be dealt with.
Well, now that becomes the question of how. So there's two questions here. One is stay in DD, go to CD. Question 2 is once we're in CD, because at this point we're finalizing decisions. So at that point, Jack can make their recommendations, but they're not making the decisions, which would mean Eric and Matt would have to come back with me and come back every month with a list of here's what they want. And as we go into CD, things are finalizing. So at that point, there may be a point. Or you take the rest of the list and you say, when we get to bid opening, we'll decide what we can afford.
But you're also
Either
gonna
one's
have a
possible.
realistic cost analysis at that time. We don't have that now.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah,
I question those.
That'll
So
help.
that's the advantage.
So looking at the estimates, right now, if we just do the two, it's 675, you're adding to your current budget. Now, that's leaving the fitness room in or out. You want the fitness room to be an adult, which means it's an alternative, or is the fitness room a non-negotiator? We have to have them. I mean, those are questions that, before we go, these are things ARC needs to know before they proceed, is what.
Yeah, yeah, and that the fitness room thing is another another kind of inconceivable recommendation from ARC, because what the savings that comes from that $1 million is the square footage cost of the fitness room. And if you remember from the layout, the fitness room is kind of in the middle of the building. So it's, you know, it's between the lobby and the pool portion and the party rooms. So it really pretty much dead center of the floor plan. So if you say to a contractor in a bid, like if you go to CD tomorrow and they snap their fingers, the drawings were done tomorrow, and you give it to a GC as an ad alternate, they are redesigning the entire building if they do this one way or the other. Because if they take it out, they, in order to, it's in the center of the building, so you don't get the savings from it by removing it without shrinking the building around it. And to shrink the building, just imagine that room in the middle of your house, and you decide, I'm going to take it out and I'm going to squeeze all the walls to absorb that space over my living room that was gone. It's now gone. Everything's moving. Everything in the entire building is moving. And a GC is going to do that rather than the architect that we're paying. To me, that's the wrong person to be squeezing the entire structure, figuring out what to do.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. That's again another ARC thing that I don't understand, and I don't think that Jack understands.
And I know we've looked at a lot of designs, but what I understand is if the fitness room wasn't there, they'd go back to the designs when they had to make the last summer when we had to make the significant cuts, getting rid of the second story and such. The fitness room wasn't there, but the two party rooms were basically where the fitness room was. So I think the cut would be getting rid of the hallway and pushing the wall that way. So yes, I disagree. But so what the ARC has said that they've got the designs basically for that already. It's the old designs of basically making the party rooms, you enter the party rooms from the lobby instead of going down the hallway. So, but either one. I mean, if the fitness rooms are not negotiated, that's fine. That's something else to decide. Is if we don't want to make that an add-on, we just want to put that in the.
For me, it's a pretty big non-negotiable because one of what we told the community they were going to get, and I understand that, right? I get it that they're shrinking.
I'm just saying they have a plan for it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I would like us to look at alternative funding if necessary, but I would not like to see that leak.
Okay.
You're creating a facility that is very small. Once again, I'm say, welcome to Sketchy Head. You got a pool. Come on in. It's there. You got changing rooms. But that's it.
Okay.
Or two pools. Yeah.
There you go.
No, I understand. I'm just saying there's a reason that room it makes it flow together as a facility and not just a pool area, just an indoor pool. And I think it'll get more use than action.
Yeah, and it was, that's another one that's been part of our public dialogue from the very beginning. There's never a time that there wasn't one in there. There was a period where it was envisioned to be more of a fitness facility with equipment. And then because of feedback from some of the private fitness facilities and kind of consideration across the Jack, decided just to make it a multi-purpose fitness room without that significant amount of equipment. So that's really been the only change over time, but it's been part of the regular public conversation. And like I said, if it was where the patio is in the building and it's either there or not, that's one thing, but it's in the center of their design. So taking it out or taking it out if it's in there or putting it in if it's not is a fundamental restart of the building. And I get what you're saying, Brian, about these older designs, but they haven't done it. They haven't lifted a finger on any of those older designs in a year. So we would incur way more costs than we're sitting here talking about now for them to restart an old design that they haven't done any work on in a year.
Matt, didn't we have a discussion about cost recovery on that too? I mean, the fact that people are using that room to teach classes, there's got to be some income and go on that.
No, for sure. And like I said, that's the challenge I have with us telling ARC, that to me, I think the fact that we would say to ARC, hey, the board supports these major items, right? Because that's big waypoint kind of stuff for them, right? So the board supports these major items so that ARC can go forward and work on those. And that's the blessing. The rest of the stuff you also have to get done too, ARC. But those are all, fractional percent kind of items, like Jennifer, you said, get them done kind of thing. But these two big items that are going to require them to do some design work, both on the HVAC design and on the footprint layout, because it's light roof line moving, foundation moving, systems moving, stretching. The board has said, yeah, we support this and go forward with that. Because even if we just stay in CD, I mean, say we stay in DD, they're not going to go forward with these things because there's such large chunks unless we have board support for them. So I think that our chance, one thing we could do tonight is do what you're talking about, and kind of to your cherry pick point, Krista, just formally acknowledge that we support these large changes, and then we leave the small changes to the ongoing work of the JCC. Maybe that's a middle ground that we give clear guidance, and we keep all these things that are these smaller things that are important, like the lifeguard thing, like the train waste heat recovery thing, like keep those things on the churn for getting them done. But we formally say, we acknowledge that we want, or we direct ARC to move forward with these large changes, specifically because they're so big. We want to give board authorization for them.
CD or DD?
So I think where we're landing though is CD with the inclusion of the two items.
Three.
Three items.
That's a third.
Well, the fitness room.
Oh, it's just removing it as an add-on.
Sorry.
So it's in there. So I'll give you just kind of a visual so you know what you're talking about. These are estimates again. That does put what ARC's estimates over the $29 million mark. Again, my only concern in my part of this conversation is that we get a bid we can live with. As long as we have a bid in February we can live with, and it all else matters. So what I'm understanding, listen, I'm going to regurgitate what I'm hearing and see if I'm hearing it right. Moving to CD with the understanding that we're going to take basically the February designs. We're going to add the pool deck. We're going to add the HVAC upgrade. We're not going to talk about the fitness room. We're just going to leave it the way it is. All the other items that Jack is working on, if they want to officially move them forward, they can bring them back to the next board meeting. If it's
Yeah, and that's not what I'm suggesting. $5,000 and $10,000 things, I think, are not an efficient way for us to go through this process. I think we lump those into usability and M&O sustainability. We call it sustainability bucket, and we say Jack is authorized to work through those with ARC. Because bringing those back, I think, is not the best approach to this. Over the next 2 years, we're going to be doing that. That's gonna create delays that are gonna incur way more cost than the cost to implement all of them.
I thought, Brian, I thought I was under the understanding that Paul had said that this would be in the coming months that we would review these items, not, years, correct? I keep asking that same question.
no, I'm sorry. There's still what Paul and I were talking about was get them working on the last February list.
Right.
And then all the other JCC work can continue. And that when we open up the bids and realize we either have the money or we don't, either we're under budget or we're over budget. At that point, the board can decide if they want to add green zone. That was the discussion.
But wouldn't we?
Yeah, but again, that's
discussion now.
Second,
Wouldn't we still be continuing this discussion? Let's say 2 weeks from now, we have a meeting.
Yeah.
Again, with Paul, and we start to talk about, because we haven't met,
Right.
and talk about the
Mhm.
specifics of this. This is what I'm getting at.
right,
That I'm assuming that's the way I read your original email.
right. Well, the challenge of CD is things start to get finalized. The first part of CD is a lot more flexibility. There's a lot more opportunity for design input. And as we get farther into CD, things start to become final. And then it becomes much trickier to analyze. But the point is that after this is all said and done, we can still add things. Let's say some things get cut because we're thinking we don't have enough money. that, hey, we do have enough money because we got some grants, so the bids came in low.
Yeah,
Um,
but you're to the point that Eric, you're making, like, if we say that, then they're gonna go forward and they're gonna put a concrete bench in between the two pools that's currently in the design. And we don't want that. Like, it's gonna make life harder for us going forward. It's a $10,000 thing, right? That's something that each one of us, I can't imagine that we think that that's a great idea to have that in the design. If we wait a year from now to say, yes, we want to do that, it's gonna be a much more expensive thing than $10,000.
It won't be gonna be the same price, because it's the time we go out to bid, that's when we would make these changes. But let me throw out, that's fine with me. If the board wants to authorize JCC to act on their behalf and authorize, there's about $600,000 worth of estimated differences between the 675 you're talking about tonight. They are a lot smaller, and that's right, the two big items, two of the three big items, or two of the four big. If the board wants to authorize JC to work on their behalf and not come back to you guys because they are slow, that's certainly an option.
I think that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
but I'm saying, wouldn't we continue the work? I'm willing to meet with Paul in the coming weeks
Right.
to offset any, lack of communication as we move into CD. That's the way I thought this was approaching. I get that we can come back after all is said and done.
Yeah.
And there's a cost value with
Right.
each one. But what I'm suggesting is, for what Krista was talking about, okay, we're saying these are things that we value, we
Yeah.
need this addressed immediately. These other items, why are we not able to communicate that in the next couple of weeks or a month? It doesn't have to be a year later. It doesn't have to be at the end of the CD. So that's what I'm suggesting is,
Right.
I'm willing to work through this with them still
Well, and I
and
think,
move into CD. That's
yeah,
what I
and I think that's not unrealistic. As we get farther into CD, like I said, it gets trickier to add things.
That's why I'm
But,
suggesting we
The
need.
question becomes, who has the authority to authorize it at this point? Because it's no longer design concepts that we're talking about, it's actual decisions being made that have financial costs in them. So the board, like I said, it is smaller item stuff. If the board wants to say, Jason,
My
you could just say,
suggestion would be that we're talking about these items. Obviously, that's gonna take within the next board meeting. It's not gonna happen overnight. And then we come back to the board and we talked about, okay, the drain wastewater heat recovery system, this is what we came up with. And now we come back to the board on a regular basis, just like we would
Yeah.
in a committee report.
Yeah.
That's what I'm suggesting.
yes,
As
yeah, that gives the board the power.
moving forward, but at the same time, address these things that are on the list.
Right, and that's the question I was just asking was does the board want to move this faster so that they don't have to come back and talk about this?
My
Or-
suggestion is subject to board approval.
Okay.
I would want the board to be a part of this, and I don't see any reason that we couldn't do that on a monthly basis.
Yeah. Yes, and we may get to a point
Like that.
3 or 4 months from now where it's too late, and then those items can be left on a list that we talk about after we open up our.
And I don't want that to happen. That's why I'm suggesting.
Yes,
that.
no, I agree. That makes
Next
total
go back
sense to me.
and Come back a month later, we'll say to the rest of the board, here's what we talked about, here's what we're at.
So enter CD with the two big items being added now. With the understanding that JCC is gonna keep meeting and then we'll, with
In
ARC,
the immediate future.
and come back to the board with any combined recommendations to add from the list. That makes total sense to me.
That's my recommendation.
Right,
So go back and now explain to me again, what is the material benefit of moving into CD versus staying in DD? If, as you said, we're at risk of going too far down the path and then being either unable to make updates, or at the cost of unwinding things is more than we want to bear. So what is the benefit of moving to CD?
Well, ARC's got work they're not doing, and right now they're just doing design stuff, and there's some things that can be moved along. ARC's, their opinion is escalation costs are very significant, and there's a couple. Hold on for 1 second, Matt, I think sorry, just one. I'm making an excellent point, this much in this, I'm just kidding. I'm just-
Nicely done.
Yeah.
It's the heat that's getting to Brian.
Hey, you see this? I got a little fan. Little fan right here. I think the other thing is that any item on this list again, can be brought up again when we open those bids.
Right.
There's nothing on this list that we're closing the door on at any point. Even if it's CD, they say the door's closed, we can't deal with that right now, as we've.
Well, no, but I'm not saying work the negative. I'm saying, tell me what's the benefit of being in CD from DD.
We're not paying an ad service to ARC to do more design work, and we're not paying the potential escalation costs that ARC says are significant and are very much risk. And it allows them to get into CD work, which they can't do right now. Those are the three benefits I would see.
Oh, yeah. See, I mean, but the CD work is the schematics, which we're saying, like, we want to make sure that they do things like increase this deck space, and they can't do schematics, right, until they've made the design changes to do that. So we're telling them, don't, be cautious, step through this in a sequential way and then get to the drawing part, right? I mean, there's DD work yet to do to implement these two big things. There's still DD work to do because they haven't implemented them yet in DD, right?
Well, that work assumably would be done in CD at that point.
Right. No, I get it, and I am no expert at this. So with that caveat, I'm just saying the reason we stayed in DD originally is because they gave us, there's this thing called 100% DD drawing set, which means we're done with DD and we're going to start doing schematics. So this, if we're in support of this idea of changing the footprint for this deck space thing and the HVAC as two major things, that they're not at 100% of DD. They're at 97% or 99% or something, right? They still got some DD work to do because it's not 100%. So again, I'm no expert at this, but my logical part of my brain says, why would we go into this thing if we're not at 100% yet? Because it's more appropriate. That work is supposed to be done in DD, whatever the difference is, it's more schematic stuff. It's more, yeah, I mean, it's more conceptual design, so again, like I said, I'm trying to find the logic for going into a phase that we're going to be, doing stuff. The cart's going to be before the horse.
I understand that hesitation, but at the same token, I would like to see real numbers we're working with. And I think that's one of the benefits that might be overlooked. Not to mention we're moving forward, as several people have said. I just think the public would like us to be moving forward, and we're kind of getting stuck here. I think the bigger picture has become very clear, and the minutia, and I hate to say minutia, but the smaller items that we're talking about here, they're not small items, and I understand that, but I think they can start the CD process, and we still have the luxury of going, we really want to look at this in more detail. So as long as that's there, and I've asked Ryan that a couple times, and he's acknowledged that that was the discussion with Paul. So I'm completely comfortable with that.
Okay, so I was just doing the math here, and just again to try to figure out what we're talking about from an impact standpoint. So the two items that are that we talked about between the ledge, the HVAC and the deck space is $675K, right? The cold plunge tank, what if we just took that off the table for a second? Because Eric's, like I said, found this alternative that could be less than $5,000, and just draw a line through that one for a minute, if you don't mind, Eric. Then there's one other one on here that is an error. This alternate patio doors for $50,000, because we decided we don't need to do that. We interviewed a facility in Vancouver that uses the same garage doors that we had specified, and they love them, with some few exceptions, but they got some ideas on how to deal with the maintenance and operations. So that $50,000 got a line through it. So with that said, everything else in this list doesn't add up to $600,000, adds up to $290,000. So 1% of the of the cost. So given that, what I would suggest is if we say, okay, we're going to go into CD, I would go into CD. I would support a recommendation saying go into CD with the two big items, the deck space and the HVAC backup, and the 290K in other M&O sustainability quality of use items, because it's 290K, it's 1%. For these guys in their cost estimate, they would call it a rounding error. But each one of these has said there's been a lot of work to go into these $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 recommendations, lessons learned, painful lessons learned in some cases from other facilities that, again, my personal feeling is we're going to regret if we don't do. So the fact that it's a 1% number in a cost estimate that they have, ARC would tell you there is not 1% accuracy to these numbers anyway, that we would say, okay, go forward into CD, but go with these items essentially it would be removing the cold plunge tank and the alternate patio doors, that reverse cherry picking to your example, Krista, take those 300,000 out and go forward into CD with the rest of the items on.
Yeah, I'm gonna add something to that too, because it's a big dollar item. That 150,000 for fitness room windows, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, our last meeting, we decided, I thought that wasn't the recommendation, that we were gonna go with their original drawing.
So was that.
That's a big chunk of change.
That wasn't at the last meeting. So.
Well, man,
Yeah. No, you're right. No,
that
Eric, it's a great point. You caught that. I didn't catch it. So yeah, so draw a line through those three things:
that's
cold
huge.
plunge, fitness room windows, and the alternate patio doors. Draw a line through those three things, and then say go into CD, and take the rest of those things with you. One of the things they did tell us when we originally said in the conversation in the meeting we had between us, the Jack, and them on this ending DD about 4 months ago, we originally said, hey, we're no experts, but we're not done with DD, so why don't we stay in DD? And what Paul told us in that meeting was, we have funds, there's already funds in your budget in the 27 million plus, the design fees that are in that 27 million. We already have funds in your budget for CD work in CD to make changes, because we know you're going to make changes. Remember, they gave us the 100% DD drawing set, with 3 days notice before saying, we want to leave DD. And so obviously that's not enough time to look at their drawing set when they gave it to you for the first time, right? So they said, no worries, there's money in, and they didn't specify how much money, but there's money, hours and money in CD for us to make changes. So I think he already made his bed there by saying there's budget. It's already included in the budget we've given you to do the work to churn through these things that are on this, the things that would remain on this list. So I think from a design standpoint, he's already said, before we're deep into schematics and we're, drawing things in pen instead of pencil, but well before that, there's money and time to make these improvements, changes, modifications, once we're in CD phase. So to me, I hadn't thought about that till you just said that, Eric. Like, to me, I feel like I can support going into CD, knowing that ARC has told us that, if we can, like I said, maybe reverse cherry pick out, Krista, those three items, and then they have ARC has their marching orders.
So already we're now looking at this list and we found a couple of items that should be crossed out. I no longer have confidence in this list.
To be fair, I missed the last meeting, so I will be fair. This was my list, and I want to make sure I'm throwing myself. They may have caught that if I did.
My point is that perhaps there needs to be more discussion at JACC about these other items. But what I'm hearing is as a board, we are confident that we want to move into CD. We want to extend the building to add deck space, and we want them to add HVAC backup for us. That's, again, what I'm getting for consensus for everyone. The rest of these items sounds like they do not need to be decided now. There still is some back and forth on them. And since we don't need to make a decision now on them, and they are so small, let's move them back to JACC.
Fine tune the list. We'll talk about it next month, but let's get Mark to work.
And I think to show Matt's point, I think which is a good one, if you see the numbers on the screen, I just kind of wrote them up. If you just add the two items, go back in the fitness room, you're about 29,175. If you take out the cold plunge, which by the way, the cold plunge cost isn't the actual thing, it's you have to expand your mechanical rooms, so but if you take those things out, take $450,000 out, it does show pretty close. But the question is, we have, next month they can bring the list and say, yes, we want all of them.
So, yeah, so.
Well,
don't
but-
forget,
but-
there's also 22, there's 22% soft costs, right, for whatever we added. So if we're picking out those three items, it comes out to, let's see.
Those,
two-
no, Carrie, those are inclusive of soft costs.
When I see
There.
the list that I'm looking at, so 600,000 for the extending the deck space. Separately, there is a subtotal at the bottom, which is 22%. And when I do the math, so it's
You're the business manager. You can't-
so another 22%. So when I add things up, I get us being $4,029,000 over budget. Where is that gonna come from? If the grants don't come through, if the grants do come through. I mean, I'm not, operationally, how are we gonna handle that? I mean, yes, these things may add, operations revenue, but you have to, what are the other creative options that we can do to pay for 4 million or 30,000?
I think that's an excellent point, and that also points to why we do want to move into CD so that we get real cost. As you have said a couple of times tonight, Eric, these are still not definite enough for us. And again, that's another reason to go forward into CD so that we can start locking these things down. But actually, a question that I wanted to ask earlier and did not have a chance. So yes, those grants are for those specific items. But what about capital expenditures? We've been fortunate enough to receive money from the state. Are there any plans for going forward?
Yes. Yeah, that's on, if you go to his slide there, we've got 2 state capital budget windows between now and the end of the project. Starting submittal would be December of this year and December of next year.
Any of those grants change the numbers drastically. The 2.4 million that Matt's going through there, that changes everything. I mean, it changes because it may not be for these specific items on the list, but it drives the cost down to the whole project. Which, the conversation is very different than that.
Right.
So,
And again, I'm
Carrie,
going back
I
to
hear
the,
you. I absolutely hear you about that very large number over budget. Absolutely. But I still feel like we're talking in ethereal and need to go forward.
So I guess at what point do we decide, after the bid openings, I would assume that this is not, that we need to go back and design those items back out. And, that would have to be after we also, know that whether a grant had gone through or not.
It's a great question. I want to follow up with another, me and Paul talked a lot over the last few weeks, because I had a long talk about, okay, what does it look like if we get a bid that's way over what we can afford?
Okay.
And here's his comments based on his experience. He goes, Brian, basically, if it's less than $1 million, that's stuff that we can tweak around. You guys might be able to find some extra inside funding about it. Maybe that's not a deal breaker. He goes, if it's within $3 million of your budget, he goes, you don't want to lock that contract in, go to the contractor, and then we start making some small changes to get that number down. If it's over $3 million, that might be where you have to go rebid, do new permits, pay us to redesign. So he goes, he goes, I'm ballparking, we were on a phone call, and so he wasn't giving me an official statement, but this comment was basically, if you get that bid within $3 million, usually we can trim it enough to get it to where the number you're comfortable with. So there's a little bit of wiggle room at that point. But he goes, if it's over $3 million, because you're looking at 5 months escalation, paying us, that's the gamble that we don't want to get to. We want to make sure that whatever we create and put in that bid packet is something we're very comfortable. It's going to be within a range that we can accept within. So that's the ultimate goal.
That's one of my big questions is that cost override, because I'm just reading about Cheney Pool. They're putting in about 2 outdoor pools, 17 million approved by voters, and now they estimate 18.5.
Okay.
Okay, so to your point, that falls in that category. I just don't know how many projects logistically come right at, okay, we said 27 million.
Right.
27 million on the money, there we go.
Right. Yeah.
Or 26. I just don't know if that happens in today's world.
Right.
Well, and just, and with,
No, I understand, Jerry. My question is this how things work today? You know what I mean? I know in school systems, every time they throw out something that's gonna be built, well, it always goes forward. It's never come in on that particular number.
Yeah.
So.
That. You know what, the most interesting day of the next 3 years may be the day that we sit down and open those bids. We might open up new opportunities for new things. I think there's enough work going into this, and I'm optimistic, but everything we're talking about today just,
well, so,
To that very point, that's why I suggest we go to CD, because if we don't
so
have
here's,
this market, we're just spinning. our wheels.
here's an idea. How about this as an idea? Those other items on the list, we have them design in the ones that were that were approved by the JAC, and we just have them design in as the reverse of what they have on your first slide there, Brian, or the second slide. You had the fitness trim as in they call it add alternate. They have the same thing in reverse called a deductive alternate, meaning you just take it out. So we could just have them, like I said, add those items in as the JAC negotiates them, but do it as deductive alternates, meaning that the bids will, when a bid goes out to somebody, they'll bid it with all those items in, and they'll bid it with those deductive alternates out. So we'll be able to see the difference between the bid with them in and the bid with them out. And that way they're included in the bid request so that the designer is not putting a concrete bench in between the two pools, right? But they're allowed to deduct that out and put it back in if they want and show us the bid difference between those two. So treat them as deductive alternates, not add alternates, but deductive alternates. How about that?
Going back to what we've already determined, the list that this JACC recommended additions list we have in front of us, we are not feeling confident in anymore because it's not current, correct?
Well, it's Brian typed it into this slide. The JAC is completely clear on it. So it's what Brian transcribed onto this slide that has errors in it.
Well, I missed the last meeting, so apparently there were some updates and some decisions made.
And
All we
it's-
want to do is get ARC to work. There is time over the next month or two for JACC to finesse this list, and the board can make a decision whether or not they go into the final plan. We have to start moving forward. We aren't
Yeah,
going to get any good hard costs until they start doing the true design work.
So I would propose, let's go through, can we go through this list from the bottom up? And,
No,
and,
no. I want the list. I think what we've decided here is the list goes back to JACC. We have picked the 3 items, whether you want to say the fitness room is the 3rd item or it's already there. Let's put the extension of the additional pool deck space and backup for the HVAC on the must-have list
Going into CD.
going into CD. Give them the go-ahead to start. JACC finesses this list. Eric, I've watched you mark up your sheet. You have different prices, you have strikeouts. In my own head, I have strikeouts before we even came here. You already struck them out. So the confidence level in this list is not there. But they are items that can be dealt with in the next month or 2 and not impact ARC in the beginning of the CD phase. Yeah. Okay, at this point, I'll entertain a motion.
I would make a motion, I make a motion for us to enter into CD
Mhm.
with the additions of extending the building to add deck space and adding HVAC backup to the HVAC plan. With the fitness room as part of the design.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we direct ARC to move into CD phase with the additions of extending the building, the additional pool deck space, the addition of the HVAC backup, for the HVAC plan, and the inclusion of the fitness center. All those in favor say aye.
Eric, I.
Krista, aye.
Jake,
that I,
Jennifer, aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes. Thank you.
Good discussion.
Just,
That was a really, really good
well,
discussion.
and just to be clear to Jennifer's comment about strike throughs, you know, these are items that we've talked about. This is my own way. It doesn't mean that we've talked all about it. It means the JAC has talked about it, and Brian wasn't at the last meeting. So there's just a little bit of,
That's
you know,
fine.
it's structural there. It's not like these haven't been talked about. It's not like we don't know what they are or why they should be there. It's just getting confirmation from all on hard numbers and ifs. That is not.
And let me, Let's say-
Yeah.
and I'll throw out
All these are.
something that Matt,
From a bigger list, narrow down.
I'll throw something that
I'm for them,
Sure.
but
Matt was right too. This was my list based on a somewhat recent JACC list, but this was not a list that was submitted by JACC for the board meeting. I wasn't intending to get this deep into the list, that's why I didn't get it that way, but anyways, that's good conversation. These conversations are gonna be happening over the next few years. They're good. They're gonna be tough. We're gonna go back and forth and it looks like we might be on a 2 to 3 minute break.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna pause the video real quick. Just have the room and stuff.
Are you pausing or are we still live?
You are still live. I'm gonna have to pause it without stopping it. I'm gonna go. Okay. Right.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Yeah, that's really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Back there, we see it. I know.
All right, we're moving on to new business. Policy manual review, sections 5 and 6,
All right.
finance and finance.
As promised,
That was a fun read.
yeah, well, no, since we had such a light conversation, we were thinking of something a little deeper. The purpose of tonight is just to get this into your hands. We've got a whole other month at least before anything needs to be approved. I'll just read the memo really quickly. Continuing the process of updating our policy manual as promised. I included in your packet are sections 5 and 6. That's the finance section and the park section. What you're being asked to do now is to review it, propose any updates, give feedback, either tonight or over the next several weeks. Next month, I'll come with any comments or updates to the plan, share those with you. And the board at that point can decide whether or not to approve it or send it back for more work. I made it simpler this time. I think the first 4 sections had like 4 or 5 different colors. It was very bright. This time it's just yellow.
Yeah.
If it's yellow, then that's a significant change that we've made. Not significant, but it's a change that we've made. So
And when you say staff, this is you guys together?
mostly it's me and Karen.
Okay.
90, I'd say, well, me and Tom with the park stuff. So a lot of the work has been in the finance stuff and just trying to clarify some things.
May I please have a printed?
Oh, please, that's cool. All right here for you. So,
I tried.
I'm a right on paper.
Bedside reading.
You are, when you, something, just ask me. It doesn't, right, I mean,
Okay.
Or anytime any of you guys want something printed, just give me a call. I mean, we've got a copy of
I
it.
can write it out.
He's got it memorized.
you can, you can fill it out on his, you were a monk.
Let me just write it out.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. So the only question for tonight is that, did anyone have any comments? I know Eric had shot out some interesting stuff that I've been working on about the memorials. Any comments for tonight, or do you want to save your comments for the next few weeks and just reach out to me as needed? Either way is fine.
I'd be interested in volume conservation myself, but I think what.
Yeah, just if you read the section about memorials just kind of interesting because the time frame, and I'm thinking about dedications, it could have been the most recent one with the phone, but a park bench that's dedicated, and 2 weeks later, this is where my mind goes, right? I usually play out a scenario in my head. And so a park bench is dedicated to someone, 2 weeks later, it's completely vandalized, destroyed, pays for that. Because reading through this, the people who put in the park bench did.
Right.
It's not always that. I mean, it is because in reality, they come back and say, hey, you put that park bench in the wrong location, or you should have realized you need a stricter policy about vandalism and more. On and on. You can apply that in, right? But that's just where my mind goes. It's not that there's right or wrong to it, but that you allow yourself discretion and, for lack of a better word, that you don't get caught up in a libel issue with someone who's really disgruntled because they're passionate about what they dedicated. That part I've seen happen, where someone dedicates something and then a week later something happens to it. Like, all right, even though it's in the agreement, and I know that there's ways around that and ways that you can communicate effectively. That's my big question.
The whole thing of donations, we've had a few people come in and by the policy now, and it's an interesting one, it's our job to kind of set up location so that you can kind of select them. So if the board decides to allow you to put in a bench, we've already got some predetermined locations. That can get tricky because, for instance, we have a bench by our baseball field because, we have pickleball courts going in, we see benches going in there maybe someday. What usually works well with your policies, you have a really hardcore policy and it's easier to lighten that up than to have a soft policy and to try to, so it's easier to say, listen, you've got to pay for it. And then when we say, you know what, blah, 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 we'll maybe split it. If the board, if we compromise, then they feel like we're really taking care of it because we're making an exception to our policy. So, but I think that's an interesting whole discussion because how we do that is I get several, I've had 3 or 4 in the first year I've been here, people come in and they haven't followed through, but those are the questions they have. Can I put a bench in? And, where does it go? And, our policy says that we buy it. So then we buy it and they basically reimburse us. So that's an area that I think does need some looking at, and
My guess is that is very unique that way as opposed to a municipal or city park.
yeah.
You're gonna have more people willing to dedicate time and effort into something like that for all the right reasons.
And where I came from, the donations like that were all out of our senior center. People that had been working there and volunteering there for a lot of years. So an older community, you're gonna get more of that. And a community that shows 200 people show up for a movie in the park night. So it's a community that cares, and this is really a center of the community. And so people want to have some place. And just a couple of weeks ago, I was down south and my dad's got a Veterans Memorial tile in the Veterans Memorial. And I stopped by, and it just feels good to stop by and spend a moment, a windfall moment, as I call it. So yeah, that was a good catch. I think that's an interesting discussion. So are there any other comments for tonight, or do you just want to be in touch?
Yeah.
Works.
In touch. All right, agreement with City of Oak Harbor, joint surplus auction.
I get through this whole policy thing. Sorry, I should have put that as a side attachment. Well, this actually got easier because as we're working through our finance policy, we read and realized that we don't need board approval to do this. Basically, what you have is the City of Oak Harbor is sponsoring for all municipalities on the island a public auction where they're going to sell stuff. We get most of the funds minus a 10% charge to it. So Tom went through his list, and I'll show you the list that he came up with.
Didn't really look that extensive.
No, it wasn't. So Tom's done a pretty good job. I need to keep you this stuff. But this also really, like, when we get audited and stuff, it's nice to have things officially surplus and sold versus, us just holding on to them so we don't get our hands slapped. So these are the items that are all over. The only one I questioned was the 2014 mower. It seems somewhat new, but Tom said no, it doesn't run. And these ones down below are ones they found on the side of the road.
Has it been done in the past? And
Tom said yes. Tom said Oak Harbor's done this in the past.
No, I know, well, Carbon, what I'm saying is have we jumped in and done this at all?
I don't know. Tom's,
Done something like it, I don't know with Oak Harbor, but I mean,
I know the school district has auctions. I was just wondering if, obviously Oak Harbor's a distance away, if we had ever joined forces to do that.
yeah, I don't know if it was them, but we have done a surplus, like with the old van that we had,
Mhm.
that was surplus and sold at some sort of an auction, government one.
Who determines what the value is? I mean, for the starting bid or anything like that?
interesting.
No, it's like that is, or in most cases, it's done online.
Oh, okay.
And the site is go to whatever, and like, there's usually a very low minimum bid, like even for vehicles, it
Yeah.
might be like $100. And then bidding is open for a week and,
Okay.
yeah.
What we had asked is what happens if they don't buy it? We have to drive all the way back up and pick it up. And they said nothing's ever left. They
Yeah.
said because like the 3 mowers that are on the bottom, which they found on the side of the road, these guys just brought them up and been using them for parts. So they just mix and match. So, there's some handy guy that's gonna buy these. So anyway, since there's no need to vote on it, it's just more of an FYI that we're moving the asset stuff along, and that's the easiest item on the agenda. That's why I told Tom he didn't have to be here. Fishing season starts tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right. That is the end of our agenda, so we'll call the meeting at 8:10. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You do.